Hi everybody. Hey, you remember this guy, Skye Cooley? I don't know how much you've been watching the YouTube channel, but Skye and I did a video about a year ago, I think, clastic dikes. We were down by Touchy, Washington, near Walla Walla, in the Walla Walla Valley. Today, if you know Othello, Washington, and the intersection of, let's see, State Route 17 and 26. We're right there. And I don't think this is public land necessarily, so I don't know if I'll give you details on how to get in here, but this guy's got something to show us. Let's go take a look.
All right. Yeah, just come right here.
Okay.
And then there's this little path on the hay here. It should
Okay.
be fine. Just kind of swing around and come towards me.
Thank you. Good Lord. How did you find this spot?
Well, it didn't used to be such a junk pile. It used to be easy.
Oh, it's been kind of well known for a little while in your world. This is not a clastic dike location. So
Nope.
what is the topic today?
Calcretes.
Calcrete.
Yeah,
Is that like caliche and hardpan, or is that something different?
that's right. So calcrete is the formal term,
Okay.
whereas caliche is the colloquial term.
Okay.
So calcretes are calcium carbonate rich soils,
Yeah.
but these are fossil soils or relict soils.
Fossil soil. So we're already to the extent of my knowledge of these things. They've always frustrated me. I always felt like there's something more to learn about these calcretes or these caliches or these hardpans. So thrilled to be here today. And you've got some. I mean, it's work, right? It's not just a couple of ideas. You've published on these, or you will be publishing, or both.
Yeah, I led a field trip out here last year for the group out of Seattle, the Northwest Geological Society, which was terrific. Kathleen Goodman put that together, and we had a couple of USGS guys on it, and it was a great group. And so this was one of the stops. We saw about 10 stops out here.
Okay.
Got some feedback on it. So I'm in the process of describing, interpreting, and kind of putting together the story. So
Yeah, let's get into it.
yeah. So you want to just take a look at the map? Maybe we can orient ourselves a
I
little?
love it. Yeah, we're
Okay.
away from the highway noise. This is good. We're out of the breeze at the moment.
Yeah, maybe where would be good? Here good enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just sort of orient ourselves in terms of geography. So, Columbia River, here's Wallula Gap, here's the Snake River. So we're here at Othello, right here.
Okay.
To the east is the Palouse.
Yes.
So we've got thickening loess as we move to the east, but we're right on the edge of the Palouse slope, and all this stippled pattern here is loess. So we've got this geomorphic domain, right? So we've got loess tapering in to the Othello area. To the west, the Yakima Fold Belt. So fold thrust ridges to the west. Running through it all is the channeled scablands.
Got it.
So we're at this sort of triple junction between three geomorphic domains.
Love it.
That's why I'm here, is because the geology preserved here includes parts of all three systems. That's why it's cool.
Give us the three one more time. Luss.
Palouse loess, so
Yep.
the Palouse slope,
Okay.
Luss Hills,
Yep.
Yakima Fold Thrust Belt
Good.
to the west, and then the channeled scablands. Here's the Cheney-Palouse scabland tract, and there's lots of activity through here. This is Drumheller Channels.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Excellent.
here at Othello.
Yep.
So the geology in the area is Columbia River basalt, and then on top of the basalt you have two basin fill units. One, the Ellensburg Formation, but by the time you get to here, the Ellensburg is just at its feather edge, so Ellensburg really doesn't come into play so much here.
And it's so confusing anyway, even though I'm from Ellensburg, that it's such a strangely named formation, because am I right that the Ellensburg Formation is all these little interbeds in between each of the Columbia River basalt lavas,
Right.
plus the stuff on top?
That's
It's
right.
like it's almost a meaningless.
It's a garbage can unit.
Yes.
It's more functional than anything. It probably needs to be separated at some point. But
might-
yeah, a wedge of sediment shed east off the Cascades, interfingering and overlying the basalt.
Right.
We don't have much here, but what we do have is the next basin fill unit, and it's this gray unit called the Ringgold. And the Ringgold Basin was large, much larger than is shown on the map. But the Ringgold has always been interpreted and is a fluvial system. The ancestral Columbia River and parts of the ancestral Clearwater Salmon River system. And it's this broad floodplain that grades up into a lacustrine system with a series of paleosols. So it's this basin fill unit with a through-going river system, and then undulating but low relief topography where soils have built in certain places and fluvial deposits are in others. So it's kind of a typical basin fill sequence. On top of the Ringgold are calcretes, thick calcretes
On top.
and it's the eroded truncated surface of the Ringgold. The Ringgold is Pliocene, the calcretes are later, but there's this gap in our geologic record and a lot of our knowledge on that time. At the end of the Ringgold, at the end of the Pliocene, somewhere around 3 million years, to when we first see Ice Age flood deposits coming from the east and from the north. So there's this gap of time between about 3 million years and then when the first Ice Age floods come in at somewhere less than 2. So I'm saying about 1.8 million years. So there's about 1 million years of time for this surface on top of the Ringgold Formation to develop soil.
Okay, before we go further, this
Okay.
is excellent. Loving this. I've learned a ton already. In numbers, you want to put the Ringgold going from 8 million to 3 million.
Yeah.
And generally, 8 million to 3 million means we're younger than the German chocolate cake for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you shut off the basalts at the latest at like 6 or something,
Yeah.
we're not really in that domain.
Right.
We're not dealing with those very youngest basalts.
So for many of these, for many of these videos we've been doing, Columbia River basalt lavas, even the Elephant Mountain flow, even the Pomona flow, all these things, those are the youngest, the top layers in this German chocolate cake, and we're up in the frosting now.
Yeah.
On the cake.
Yeah. But
And-
below Missoula flood
But
deposits.
got it right. So we're
Yeah.
we're bypassing the Ringgold Formation today. We're not really in the Ringgold time. We're younger than the Ringgold.
Yes, just younger.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's this, so our constraints are the top of the Ringgold and the base of the Missoula floods, which are 20,000 years or younger. So there's this skiff of sediment in here. It's a few meters thick that's not well studied. And some people call it the Pliopleistocene unit or ancient Palouse loess or, there's all these funny little terms, but we're talking about post-Ringgold, pre-Missoula flood. The difference between the loess and the fold belt is there's a long record of stability, almost 2 million years of accumulating loess and soil development here. This is a stable region, as opposed to the Yakima fold belt, which is an actively deforming thrust system
No
over the
idea.
past, 10, 15 million years.
No idea.
So a real difference between here and there. These calcretes form a surface that's both folded and faulted in this region and mostly underlie the bulk of the loess on this side. So as a geomorphologist, I'm interested in surfaces, and that surface, this calcrete bearing, this armored surface, is a regionally correlatable unit, which is a different way to think about them than in the past. People have kind of hinted at things, but there really hasn't been a concerted effort to get at the calcretes themselves. They've been used as sort of tools to establish other things. So they've been mapped with Ringgold, but they're clearly not Ringgold. They post-date Ringgold.
Okay.
They're not loess, but there are hints of calcretes in loess that seem to have similar characteristics.
Okay.
All right? It's a part of the section, it's a part of the stratigraphy in eastern Washington that's not been studied nearly as well as the basalts, the flood deposits, or the Ringgold and the Ellensburg. So it's kind of a missing part of our section. So come on down here and we'll establish the base of the section.
Is this a natural little thing or an artificial canal from the...
This is a wasteway, so it's a canal, but it's part of the sort of the last. It's not serving irrigation; it's the wastage from irrigation.
Got
So
it.
it's a wasteway.
Oh, good. We'll take a little dip after this.
Yeah, what could go wrong? All right, so what we're seeing at the base of the section is these gray, green, and orangey fine. Can you see those laminated silts? Okay, so that's the top of our Ringgold section. That's called the Savage Island member.
Oh, yeah.
And it's real distinct. It's these laminated siltstones. And it's a sluggish lake. It's not quite a lake, it's kind of a river lake, but it's got lacustrine features, and it's very distinctive. So we know we're in Ringgold there. As we move up,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Casual fans know the White Bluffs.
yes, well exposed at White Bluffs.
So Ringgold, that's maybe the best place to get familiarized with a bunch of exposure of Ringgold all in one place.
Yeah, there are other places right here near Othello that have beautiful exposures too.
Yeah.
But the Ringgold has three different parts to it. Its lower part is more sandy and gravelly,
Yeah.
and its upper portion has three distinct lake fillings and spillings, separated by paleosols.
So if we're at the tippy top of the Ringgold here, we're approaching 3 million years.
Yeah,
A little older than 3 million.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a good marker. So calcrete is a calcium carbonate rich subsoil. So we're talking about the precipitation of calcium carbonate below the surface, not too far below the surface.
Okay.
And there's a system that's been established for sort of relatively addressing the morphology of calcretes, and that's called the carbonate stage system or morphology, and that's been refined through the years and it's pretty well accepted. This would qualify, well, the carbonate stage system goes from 1 to 6, where 6 would be absolutely the farthest along development, the most mature calcrete you'd ever find, which would be like New Mexico. Up here, these are stage 5 calcretes. So we're right at the far end of calcrete development. These are very mature soils. So much so that you can hardly distinguish the parent material. Here the parent material is actually those lake beds, and you can actually follow it. If you look closely, we can see some fine partings and bits and drips and drabs of lake beds till about here. And then above that, this horizon just becomes fully plugged and completely overprinted by calcium carbonate. So the amount of time represented by this is substantial. And that's kind of how these calcretes have been used by people in the past to just say that this was a lot of time that has gone by to create this soil.
And that's always been the frustration for me. That's just kind of a limp statement. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like,
Yeah.
it's an old soil and it took a long time, and it's like, well, how long, and like how regional, and
Right.
why here, and
Right.
why don't we have calcretes through the entire geologic record?
So it's a dryland climate. These
Okay.
only form in really dry areas. You have to have enough water through the system, at least seasonally, to bring the calcium ions and the carbonate together in a soil solution and then dry that soil out and precipitate this stuff. You also have to have the aid of plant roots and the microbial communities that thrive around plant roots. So this is a sagebrush system,
Okay.
and you've got several different factors that conspire to build carbonate in the soil.
Okay, I keep hearing calcium carbonate. I'm not afraid to sound dumb. That's limestone, calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
So, but this is the opposite of limestone. This is not a warm, shallow sea. This is an
Right.
arid scene.
Right, right.
So how can you tell the difference? Why is this not limestone and why is this calcrete instead?
Yeah, this is a pedogenic carbonate. So
Oh,
this
boy.
is a soil-formed carbonate.
Okay.
It's got tons of features, plus it's got associated landscape position. If you look, there's no question that this is a pedogenic carbonate with some groundwater influence.
Okay.
So the thickness of this calcrete has something to do with its nearness to the water table or the paleo water table.
Okay.
This probably was accelerated growth in a certain amount of accelerated growth because it was near the water table, probably in the capillary fringe for at least part of its life. So you got thicker development.
Mm-hmm.
Its soil position is easier to see when you see what's on top of it and these next few ledges, but this is the basal ledge, so this is
Okay.
the first ledge of calcium carbonate.
And it does
So
make a
first
ledge. It's
calcrete.
hard shit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Farmers are plagued by this stuff and have to rip it.
Yeah.
Above that, you see this reddish unit, and it's a silt, but it's got a component of sand to it. It's burrowed throughout by cicada, so cicada feeding burrows, so nymphs of cicada, there's a good pattern, create these little tubes that they chew through the sediment, and then as they move through it, they leave those little concentric ridges, these little 2 centimeter or so diameter nodules. So this is a nodular, silty, sandy unit with soil features. You see all these root casts and filaments. So this is definitely a soil.
Are these holes modern animals or fossil
The holes are, yeah, bees and such. Yeah.
today?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
If we kind of step back, maybe step back this
Good,
way, we can
good.
see the upper ledge.
God, I'm so ignorant with this stuff. This is a great learning opportunity. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how much you want to go into the actual processes, but we could talk about actual calcrete formation if you'd like. It's a little dry, but so we're coming through one soil profile or one
Yeah.
subsoil profile,
Yeah.
truncated at the top. So a new sediment deposit on top of that. That's the red stuff, and then another soil profile developing on top of that that creates another carbonate ledge.
Okay.
On top of that, there's a thin skiff of, again, the same reddish material, same soil features on top of that, and then a third calcrete ledge that's more than 1 meter thick.
Huh.
So we've got 3 ledges here, divided by, or interfingered with, I shouldn't say interfingered, with soils, loessl soils between. So sandy loess soils between.
Okay.
The amount of sand in these pink units suggests that there's some water transport. But here it's a little ambiguous. So we've got basically 3 ledges and some sediment in between.
Okay.
Each of those ledges takes an enormous amount of time to develop. So we're in the hundreds of thousands of years in terms of age.
Generally, but no way to really keep track of time.
Yeah, you can try to date these things, but there's an issue with open system effects that essentially when you try to date these through U-series, the U-series method, the uranium-thorium method, you end up with ages that that you can really only use as minimum ages.
Okay.
And so several 100,000 years minimum. Now what does that mean? Just on its own, it's like, well, is it just calcrete ledges and some soil nerdy stuff? Is this really geology? Well, the important part here is that this represents a long period of surface stability, an enormous amount of time represented in these soils for stability across this region, a region to our east that we know is stable over at least the last 2 million years. But to the west, this same unit, this calcrete bearing interval exists at the top of saddle mountains, on the flanks of the folds, and in the basins between the uplifts. So this is a unit that coated, that crusted a surface and took a long time to develop.
Took a long time, and you keep saying stable, meaning that there isn't geologic action to crack it, offset it, erode it away.
That's right.
Just a quiet time, basically.
Yeah.
Do you want to think of it that way, as a quiet time?
Well, I guess I would say it's a surface that's not been eroded away.
Yeah.
And it's not been buried.
Yes.
So it's kind of a, yeah, if you want to call it quiet, fine. It's just a stable geomorphic system for hundreds of thousands, if not longer.
And because
years.
it's a soil horizon, we're at the surface.
Three of them, yeah.
A former land surface.
Yes.
Without a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a new, if you're uncomfortable with this, or if it's sort of unfamiliar, it is unfamiliar. We don't talk about this stuff in Eastern Washington.
Precisely.
But it is everywhere. And you just have to sort of remember that maybe we haven't solved everything in Eastern Washington geology, and there are still places to discover. You know, these are on par with some of the great calcretes that people have studied around the American Southwest and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got them here in Central Washington. At our next stop, we'll see these sediments change character dramatically.
Okay.
And so I brought you here because this is the typical look for these inner beds, or these reddish beds.
Got it.
But over there, you're kind of seeing an end member on this same sediment in the same stratigraphic position that is radically different than here.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's a beautiful outcrop, even though we're here kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, it is.
This is what it takes. I'm convinced. I was talking to John Stone from UW the other day, and we're out in the middle of this nowheresville, Coyote Hollow or Draw or somewhere. We're like hiking along, like, how much farther is this place? And you know, we're just saying, you know, all the easy stuff has been
Yes,
solved.
yes.
That's easy.
They've been cherry picking for the last 150
Yes,
years.
they have.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of boot leather to actually get anything done. And that's what I've been doing for quite a while. There's a lot of smart people that have come out and looked at all sorts of geology, quaternary geology in Eastern Washington. There's not a lot of people that actually do the hard yards and actually do the work to describe in detail what they see. There's a lot of arm waving and a lot of correlation and thoughts,
Right.
especially with respect to that ancient flood record, the pre-Missoula flood record. But a lot of people have come and talked, but not necessarily done the work. And so I'm trying to come back behind and fill in some of that gap with actual data.
And on a personal note, you don't even live here. You live in Montana. You're coming over here every few months, it feels like, to continue this work. So
Yeah, I love it.
this you must see a place for you to contribute or to collaborate with other people who
Yeah,
are
I think so.
potentially in a spot to see the significance of these that we didn't have before.
Yeah, and I think other people are really tuning into not only the calcretes, but other sediments in this interval elsewhere around the basin. I was out spent the last week with USGS guys, Brian Atwater and Richard Waite and John Stone from UW, doing exactly this, looking into what is the evidence for these pre-Missoula floods? Like, really, what is it? What is the evidence other than the assertion? In some places you find clear evidence. Other places it's like, well, maybe that was a little too loose for that conclusion. Mm-hmm. So there is an old flood record here, but it's not been as well sorted as maybe the literature would have you believe.
Old meaning older than 20,000 years ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go see this other spot.
Okay,
This is
great.
great. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll follow you.
Kind of makes sense though. We're kind of in this middle
Yeah.
Between known, well-studied stuff, we're in between.
Well, that's a perfect way to lay it out, and I love the idea that it's God, what's a quick analogy? Like you've got a wall calendar, and everybody loves the certain months on the wall calendar, but there's a couple of those months people are like, yeah, boring. I'm not going to pay any. Nothing happens that month.
Right.
So, hey, wait a minute now.
So sometime around 3 million years ago, the Columbia River's base level dropped significantly. There was a base level drop.
Started eating into the stuff that had just deposited
Yes.
earlier.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the thoughts right now are that the river for a while was competing with the Simcoe volcanic pile down at Goldendale.
Oh.
And then and that was manifest up here in the Pasco Basin as those lakes
Okay.
in the upper Ringgold.
Yeah.
Which this is here. The base of this outcrop is that upper Ringgold.
Same.
Same stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man.
So that incision event left these surfaces high and dry,
Okay.
and that's where these soils are developing atop, right? So that surface, that abandoned surface, is where we get these calcretes. And that's why people will use the term Pliopleistocene
Okay.
unit, because it's a Pliocene surface, but it's really Pleistocene deposits, or at least paleosols.
I just assumed they always said Pliopleistocene because they didn't really know exactly
Well-
what age they were talking about.
Well, that's true too.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a long history of people renaming and naming and
Yeah.
rearranging. Yeah.
Damn, this is attractive, but you want to go to the other spot.
Let's go to the other spot. We see the full stratigraphy there, but you got your
Okay.
whistle wet,
I do.
and we get the benefit of a feedlot.
Oh, I
so
can
we get
smell
the
it.
that's the smell of money, Nick.
The
Smell
smell
of
of money.
You're lucky it's not August, because whoo, this is ripe. It gets right through to you.
So Othello to the south.
Yep.
There's the Saddle Mountains where I was yesterday, if you saw that video, with the private land. Looking west now, kind of some interesting clouds.
Drumheller channels right across the valley.
Drumheller channels, okay. All right, well, oh yes, and a beautiful landfill.
This is why these haven't been discovered. So the Ice Age flood record is well established for the late Wisconsin, right? So from 18,000 to 14,000 years ago, no question, Missoula flood cycle. Well established, clear as a bell.
That's what's in the brochures. That's the story that almost everybody knows off the street.
That's right.
But there's an emerging older story.
Yeah, and what we're finding is there's certainly something that's very old, that's underneath these calcretes, that's in this package that we're looking at, this interval. But there's also rumors and hints of, and evidence of a sort of a middle-aged set of floods too, early and middle Wisconsin age floods. And that record is definitely more subtle, and it's difficult to produce floods during that period by filling Lake Missoula and spilling Lake Missoula. There just doesn't seem to be an ice margin record that supports some of these middle-aged floods, pre-Missoula, but not super old. So 130,000, 150,000 year old floods. That's the
middle age?
That's the middle age. But there is this old thing out here, probably one flood, not quite sure. But there's definitely an old record.
Older than 780,000.
Well, it appears to be. The dates are, we've not dated it,
Right.
but these soils are telling us that, yeah, we're probably pushing 1 million years old if
Okay.
we're so bold.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we're talking this morning about kind of juggling 3 major chapters of Ice Age flooding in the
Yeah,
Northwest,
that's
as
a good
opposed
way
to
to
just
put it.
one younger than 20,000 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's a good way to put it.
And your calcretes, aka paleosols, are helping us tease out these older
right.
Missoula floods or Canadian floods or whatever. You know, we don't need to go there, but
There's been a pretty good narrative developed over the years for pre-late Wisconsin floods, but you know, it hasn't been a coherent record. It's been sort of somebody working here, somebody working there, and then telling each other or citing each other, but not really working out the hard details. And the dating techniques are tough too. It's tough to date this stuff.
So before we get our nose here, who are the characters besides you that might be well, you know, you're being modest now, but like, you know, who's thinking about this and potentially publishing in the next 5 to 10 years on these older Missoula or older Ice Age floods?
Yeah, well, PhD student right now, Joel Gombiner at University of Washington, is definitely on the tip of the spear on this stuff, working with Brian Atwater and John Stone.
Okay, University of Washington.
Yep, University of Washington, you'd expect nothing less. And Richard Waite still is, he's becoming more interested in this stuff and has a skeptical eye towards certain publications. You're
really picking your words carefully there.
Richard's great. We just spent 3-4 days with him. Yeah, it was. You know, he's great. He gives me the time of day, and we enjoy each other. So Richard's great. So he's just sort of skeptical about some of the data because it hasn't been preserved well, or it's a little loose in the literature, and that's sort of a function of the time when things were published too. Right. You can't publish in the late 70s and compare it to today. We didn't have all these we just didn't have an understanding that's the same as today. Right. So the chronologies are being reworked and more robustly considered by USGS in a certain amount, but probably Joel would be the one. Let's take a look at this gravel and get a sense of what we're looking at. You want to scramble up here with me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's root ourselves in the stratigraphy again to begin with. Yeah, it's a little dicey. All right, so here's our laminated siltstones of our Upper Ringgold.
Upper Ringgold.
Okay, so we've kind of got a foundation for what we're
older than 3. That's the number I want to use.
Yeah, roughly 3.
Okay.
And then above that, we're into this boulder gravel. And this boulder gravel contains mostly basaltic clasts, but they're sizable. There's a big rip up of calcrete. There are chunks of cemented loess in this. There are boulder sized clasts of vantage sandstone in this. Mm-hmm. And if we say, well, these are just gravels, there's lots of ways to produce gravels. This could just be side stream alluvium. This could be Paleo Crab Creek, right? What's the difference? Why would anybody call this a flood deposit?
Yes.
Well, the size of the class is a big deal. Another thing is if you look where we are in relation to Crab Creek Cooley, the Scabland portion, the Drumheller Channels portion, is at least a half a mile west of us. Yeah. And then there's this bench that's mostly sediment and mostly ringgold. Uh-huh. And here we are at the margin of the floodway. There were floods that overtopped this surface, but essentially we're distal enough to where erosion wasn't dramatic. Okay, so here we are on the edge of the Crab Creek, Cooley. Mm-hmm. We're in the Scabland, but we're kind of marginal to it. Mm-hmm. Another explanation, so that's an observation. So another explanation might be, well, why aren't these just alluvial fan gravels shed off one of these basalt highlands? Well, that's the Saddle Mountains, 6 miles away. Yeah. That's Frenchman Hills, a few miles away. And there's really nothing to our east that makes much sense.
I mean, we'd need a drone shot right here to pull back and show how featureless we are here.
Yeah, it's as flat as a pancake through here. Matter of fact, this is called Paradise Flats through here. So we're not shedding material off those uplifts.
Yeah.
And Crab Creek has never had a gradient that carried much more than what it does today. It's just not that energetic. So this boulder gravel has to be brought in by something else, and floods make sense. At least one flood. So the important part about this is the coarse grain size. We do have some exotic clasts, or at least non-basaltic clasts in here, but there isn't like tons and tons of granite through here. There's not tons and tons of quartzite or anything like that. There are some, but it's anomalous.
But this is not a calcrete, or it is?
It's overprinted by Calcrete, yes. It forms a ledge, but the action is really above it. And again, we're kind of back to the usefulness of Calcrete is really, it stores time, and it means that this is a great deal of time that's occurred after this was deposited. That's really its utility. The intricacies of Calcrete, not that interesting. The intricacies of these sediments that interbed, nobody cares, right? Soil scientists care, nobody cares. But their usefulness, their utility is what we're after. So here's a ledge on top of ringgold.
Yes.
So erosional surface deposition of this boulder gravel. Then we grade up into a sediment, and this just looks like an upward finding sequence. And then we hit another calcrete ledge. And this is a bit jumbled through here, but this is our second ledge.
Okay.
Akin to that one.
Can I come down over here maybe?
Yeah. We can take a look several places if you'd like. A little tough footing.
So how did you know about this outcrop here?
I just found it.
You did?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a couple of years ago, I came out here and described about 15 locations. And really had nothing to go on. I mean, just sort of, there really wasn't a framework established for these. So I just started looking for good exposures.
That's cool.
And found quite a few. So I've got about 20, 25 in all.
I need to get higher.
So at the last stop, we had 3 calcretes essentially with some sediments between.
Right.
And the thickness was pretty dramatic. And here again, we're seeing 1 meter plus thick calcrete at the top of this section. So we've got this one, we've got a thinner one below our feet, some sediment in between, and then that boulder gravel below that's sitting right on ringgold. So the same stratigraphy, it's just we've changed out that pinky, lussy, sandy unit for a boulder gravel that grades up into that pinky, lussy, sandy unit.
Are you confident you can correlate the bouldery thing here with the sandy thing at the last stop?
Yeah, and about 10 other places too. Yeah.
I see.
So this isn't a one-off. This is something, and this is that old something that's going on the scablands. Not well constrained, not really formalized, but it looks like the Young flood record, the Missoula flood record, well established. There's certainly something very old, this. In between is still sort of debated. The folks down in Walla Walla, Pat Spencer, Nick Bader, entertained us the other day, and it was awesome. They showed us their Rouleau site, which is the northern Walla Walla Valley, where they have some of these maybe early and middle Wisconsin flood beds. Flood cut unconformities, exotic clasts, lots of paleosol development between, so lots of time, so pushing these things back, plus a tephra record that seems to suggest there's some middle-age flooding too.
But did I hear you say the middle-age flooding probably not from Glacial Lake, Missoula?
Well, that's the hard part, is that, the latest round of floods, the colossal, stupendous, monstrous floods, wiped out most of the record. And so it's hard to the climate records don't really support and the landscape doesn't really support an ice margin at that time. But so much of that record has been removed that it's like, it's tough. So there's a bit of skepticism amongst some that are looking at those middle-aged floods.
Mhm.
But the interest is still there, so people are definitely looking. It'll be interesting what Joel produces. I think just the appreciation of how thick this stuff is
Yeah.
and the degree to which it is developed. This is a stage 5 fully plugged calcrete. And there's actually cobbles in this of basalt, but it's so put together. It's so it's just engulfed everything. Calcium carbonate is just so thick here, pervasive, that it sort of masks everything that it's scaffolding on.
And you need a lot of time to develop this. Your view, almost hundreds of thousands.
You need
of
hundreds
years.
of thousands of years to develop 3 calcretes for sure. We were standing here with an expert, and we kind of were summarizing what we were talking about during the day, and he said, I don't have any problem calling that 1 million years old.
Wow.
Which, yeah, kind of set me on my heels a little bit. So who knows? We're not there yet. I mean, you probably get the feeling like this isn't, a well-developed narrative. No, it isn't. This is discovery. We're in the process of actually doing new science in a place where a lot of people have been.
And so your role in this, at least in part, is to keep finding outcrops like this.
And correlating this interval, this calcrete bearing interval, which is at most 20 meters thick, at most. It's usually like this.
Oh, I'm breathing deep here. I'm homesick. The farm in Wisconsin, I can smell it. Cow shit from here. Jesus.
Gets right through to you, doesn't it? Yeah.
So just off the top of your head, you've already correlated this spot, this set of calcretes, with a couple other places?
There's about 10 sites here in the eastern Saddle Mountains.
Oh.
There's about a half a dozen between here and Moses Lake. That one that we were looking at in Coyote Draw, I think, is a good candidate. I'm not quite sure. That's a long ways away. Moses Cooley is a long ways away. Southern Pasco Basin, there's several sites right there south of Kennewick, all over the city, really.
Wow.
There's more to discover. I guess that's
Sure.
my point.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
more to discover out here, but there aren't a lot of people that are tuned into doing field geology.
Mm-hmm.
That's a shame, because I think that master's student is out there. You just need the one that wants to discover stuff and get uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable. This is 9 days. How many showers have I had in 9 days? Not enough.
I can't smell you because of the cows, but
Yeah, that's why I brought you. Off of the Palouse slope, there's sort of this tendency to forget about the Palouse.
yeah.
But I think some of their soils, their paleosols, named paleosols in the Palouse, are probably most well-developed west of the Palouse. And Saddle Mountains has some spectacular stuff preserved up there on the crest and on Smyrna Bench and elsewhere. But, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody down the road doesn't figure out that the type section for the Palouse paleosol record isn't Saddle Mountains.
Really?
We'll see. Yeah, but these calcretes are right up on top.
Skye Cooley, we'll be looking for more from you in the coming years. It's exciting. Thank you for your time today.